The experts are now saying that 1 in 200 kids have PANDAS or symptoms related to it.
Welcome to Talking About Kids. I am your host, R. Bradley Snyder, researcher, activist, and author of The 5 Simple Truths of Raising Kids. Talking About Kids is committed to the science of raising happy and healthy children and adolescents. Unfortunately, there are times when the best research seems out of sync with the needs of families. For example, it is rare for me to encounter the parent of a neurodivergent kid who is completely satisfied with their child's diagnosis or the care their child is receiving. This is especially true for kids whose issues are defined by a combination of symptoms, some of which may be contradictory or shared by multiple syndromes. My guest today is Ethan Pompeo. Ethan has pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections, or PANDAS. In this episode, Ethan describes how his and his family's inability to find suitable treatment eventually led them to CBD. Ethan and I discuss PANDAS, his experience with CBD, what CBD is and what it isn't, the state of the research on CBD as a treatment for PANDAS and other conditions, and how Ethan's company, Green Valley Nutrition, is helping advance the science. While researchers from groups like the Harvard Medical School agree that the available studies of CBD are promising, the consensus in the scientific community is that there is more to learn, which is why you should review the evidence yourself and consult with a care team before introducing CBD into your child's regimen. Talking About Kids is sponsored in part by the Arizona Department of Health Services Must Stop Bullying campaign through its Title V Maternal and Child Health Program. For more information, go to muststopbullying.org. I do not need to remind you that innovators like Ethan Pompeo do not come on this podcast to meet me. They come on to share information that they believe benefits kids. You can do your part by sharing this series with your friends and your professional network. And now, the interview.
When I was 13 years old, I went from essentially a healthy, normal kid, so to speak, to being inflicted with motor tics, OCD, severe anxiety, these chronic symptoms of neurological disease. And we really had no answers. I went to my pediatrician, and he referred us to a specialist. And when I say us, I mean my parents and I. And we went in thinking, we're going to get an answer from this guy and we'll move on and everything will be as normal. And that's really not how it worked out. My first experience with this neurologist was, talk for 5 minutes, write a prescription, and send you on your way. And so I was misdiagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, which was essentially a label that was placed on me as an excuse to prescribe me drugs and get me out of the office. At least that's how I felt. So my initial experience with modern medicine was rather lackluster. And for many years thereon, I went from medication to medication, just trying to find something that would help relieve me from these symptoms. And these symptoms were life-changing. It wasn't just a blink or a minor tic. These were severe tics, everywhere from interfering with the way that I walked to the way that I picked up objects. Even at one point, I had one where I would hit myself in the head, and it caused me pain and exasperation and anger and really wrecked my quality of life. So when I say that we were searching desperately for options, I mean we were looking everywhere all the time. Uh,
Right.
so
No, yeah, so I mean not to get to jump ahead in your story at all, but you eventually, how did you discover that you had pandas and not one of these other misdiagnoses?
So PANDAS is a clinical diagnosis, meaning there's no real test that you can take to say
Yeah.
quantitatively, hey, this is what you have. It involves putting together the pieces of your health history, blood work, and other factors in order to determine, yeah, these symptoms and this other evidence that we have matches it qualifies you to have PANDAS. And a lot of that is, well, understanding, first of all, what PANDAS actually is and how it works in the body. PANDAS is not the cute, cuddly, black and white bear that we all know. It's an acronym for pediatric autoimmune neurological disorders associated with strep. And put very simply, it's usually a strep throat infection that triggers an unusual autoimmune response in the body. And what that looked like for me was extremely high strep throat antibody titers. And antibodies are one of the few compounds that can cross the blood brain barrier. That can be
Right.
used to benefit you in many situations where you need to fight off a foreign pathogen or something. But in my case, these antibodies went haywire and started causing inflammation in my basal ganglia, which is the motor cortex of the body. So that resulted in these life-altering tics that I told you about, the anxiety, and all the other neurological symptoms that accompanied that.
It, I have to say that um, I I was ignorant about pandas before preparing for this interview, and I'm by no means the smartest guy in this field, but I've been dealing with neurodivergent kids now for 25, going on 30 years, and so in preparing for this interview, I have to say I was kind of terrified when I was looking at the studies and I was looking at the healthcare briefs. Um, and I was terrified because it seems like it must get missed
Mm.
constantly, that there has to be just a ton of kids walking around with the wrong diagnoses. Is my read in wrong, or am I
No,
on the right track to being
yeah, you're
terrified?
absolutely right. It's very difficult to get a diagnosis, and even once you are properly diagnosed, it's very difficult to get proper treatment. And
Yeah.
the big problem with that is just a lack of education. And no disrespect to you at all, like just people just are not aware of this, right?
Right.
Even clinicians who have been in this field for decades, such as yourself, it's just we don't have enough advocacy and awareness, which is why that's what's brought me here onto your show today. After dealing with this for 20 years myself, I have become very outspoken and an advocate for this because the experts are now saying that 1 in 200 kids have PANDAS or symptoms
Wow.
related to it. So this is becoming more and more common and probably very commonly misdiagnosed, like you're saying.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about like the mistreatment too, because when I was looking through kind of clinical recommendations for treatment, and again, not an MD, I'm a social psychologist, but have spent a lot of time in the data on neurodivergent kids, and I was seeing wildly different
Mm.
treatment recommendations to the point where even to a lay person, I was thinking both of these can't be true. It can't be that you would be getting a transfusion or you'd be being put on this drug. And you went through a lot of these different treatments, if
I
I
did.
understand your
I did.
story.
I never moved forward with the IVIG transfusion because that by the time that treatment had come to my mind and had been recognized as a legitimate treatment for pandas, I I had what I call physician fatigue. I was just
Mm.
fed up with doctor appointments, fed up with meds. I had decided enough is enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And for several years, I kind of just went cold turkey and just dealt with the severity of my symptoms because quite honestly, nothing was working, and felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere by talking to these doctors until I found someone who actually knew what I was dealing with and could put these pieces together and help me understand the implications of PANDAS and what it meant for me. And then, my journey since then has been really related to reducing inflammation in my body and lifestyle
Mm,
changes that have helped brought me to where I am today. The meds never were it, right? I mean, even if they
right.
did help you, you're talking about putting a young child on heavy medication indefinitely. It's not the best health choice for anybody. And so I advocate lifestyle change and things that we can do to reduce our inflammation and fight off these foreign pathogens naturally. And in my experience, it's been a much better solution. And today I live a very high quality of life, and things are really good. So that's what I want for everybody who's listening today.
Well, and I have to, regular listeners of Talking About Kids will know my bias. If there isn't a, high quality studies about an issue, I typically don't touch it, right? But what's interesting about your story and in preparing, or first in deciding if we were going to talk at all, and then in preparing for this interview, that word, inflammation is really interesting, because inflammation as a whole is this is an area where it seems that medicine or traditional research is
Mm.
lacking, and we're discovering this role of inflammation in so many other things, and so it seemed to me, and listeners will know this from other episodes, that the same reason why we have been mistreating kids that have, intestinal problems because they're on the autism spectrum, or a whole host of autoimmune problems because they've experienced high levels of childhood trauma. This is happening to kids with PANDAS as well. That this inflammation is being treated as something separate
Mm.
from their other neurological
Right.
symptoms when it's part and parcel.
Right, that was absolutely my experience. The meds, especially initially, the meds I was being given were intended to treat these symptoms,
Yeah.
namely my tics, my tremors, those kind of things, while ignoring the baseline issue that was driving the inflammation and the encephalitis. PANDAS is largely related to inflammation. It's autoimmune encephalitis, inflammation of the
Yeah.
brain. So that's a critical issue, and if you're just kind of ignoring that while trying to treat the tics and the symptoms themselves, you're really just ignoring the warning lights that are going off in your body, telling you, hey, something's wrong, and medicating yourself, and that's not a long-term solution at all.
So let's talk now about part of your advocacy is around CBD, and this is going to be a difficult discussion for me, partially because I just don't know enough about CBD. I've been trying recently, and I'm very interested in what I've been reading. But how did you find CBD, and then what are you doing with it now?
Yeah, great. So I understand it's very taboo these days, and a lot of that has to do with the lack of information and the lack of regulation
Right.
around it, right? The problem is right now the laws vary from state to state, right? There's FDA has refused to look at this year after year. So what we have is a patchwork of different laws and regulations based on what state you're in. Here in Virginia, the laws are pretty cut and dry, right? They've made progress on
Mm.
this. If you're going to manufacture or sell these supplements, there's a series of rules you have to adhere to keep everybody safe. I can't say the same thing about other states, right? So where you buy your product, who you buy it from is critically important in
Right.
ensuring that you get a high quality supplement in the first place. But for me personally, my use of CBD actually started from an illicit use of the other plant compound. I don't know if I can
Hmm.
say this on here without getting
Oh,
your
absolutely. No, I think we need to,
okay.
right? Don't you think we do? I mean, I think that we need to, because this is part of the myth of CBD, and I want to make sure, that listeners right now, that they're not thinking that
if they have a misunderstanding about the difference in cannabinoids between, the CBD and the THC, I want to explore that. So yeah, but it started with you just using regular
Yeah,
marijuana. Is that what you were going
exactly.
to start to say? All
And
right.
I don't want to get your podcast flagged by saying the wrong thing, right?
No,
But yeah, the
no.
bottom line is, after going through my entire adolescence of being prescribed medication after medication, I mean, I had been on
Yeah.
over 40 different medications by the time I was 17. And so that use of relying on substances and chemicals for relief was normalized in my mind. So when I was introduced to marijuana, I didn't think anything of it, right? It was just another substance that I could put in my body to try to help.
Mm.
And it was the first thing I had ever tried that really gave me relief. Now, I come from a very conservative background, and my parents did not condone my use at all. I mean, my mom busted me over and over again, and until the point where I came home one day from school and my dad said, son, have you been smoking? And I said, Dad, why are you asking me this? And he said, well, you just seem so relaxed and calm. And I said, now do you see why I'm doing this? And the light bulb kind of went
Yeah.
off in his mind, like, oh wow, he really is using this like for a medicinal purpose. He's not just trying to party with his friends. And truly, that's what it was. Now, I didn't understand the physiological impact of this plant on my body at all. I just knew like when I smoked, I would feel better and so forth. But eventually the side effects of that caught up with me as well. The anxiety spiked, the paranoia, the breathing issues from inhaling particulate matter. This is very hazardous for your health, right? It's not a medicinal option really at all in terms of smoking. So what I needed was to identify the active ingredient in this plant that was actually giving me relief and how that was working. And today, knowing what I know now, I can tell you that CBD is nature's most powerful anti-inflammatory. And so by taking the CBD and extracting that out of the plant, I can now get the anti-inflammatory benefits of that cannabis without the side effects, without the risk of getting high, without the legal ramifications, without the judgment. And so it truly is not a marijuana product. The CBD is of very high medicinal value, and if you can get it without the THC, then it's essentially safe for everybody. And so that's what I advocate in terms of giving you some relief, enough relief to step back and take a deep breath and analyze your life and maybe make some tweaks and lifestyle changes that are causing you additional trouble. And so we can talk about CBD, but there's so many other things I've done to improve my health. CBD was what I call the catalyst for my lifestyle change.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of those other lifestyle changes and then get back to the CBD, because I think that it's fair to say that we're going to be seeing a lot more research coming out about CBD. Again, in preparation for this, I was talking with a clinical physician who's at a teaching hospital here in New York City, and was absolutely aware of everything that you were saying and was using it in his practice, the CBD oil in particular. So I do want to go back and talk about that. But you said you made other lifestyle changes. What other lifestyle changes helped you with this inflammation and maybe perhaps made you more receptive to the CBD treatment?
Sure. So diet and exercise are the two biggest ones. And these are things we all know that, right? We all know we should be exercising. We all know we should be avoiding fast food
Right.
and sugars and eating right. But it's easier said than done in today's society. So I really had to step back and analyze what was going on. And from my habitual marijuana use for years and years, I became very sedentary. And I didn't want to admit that because I was very active in playing baseball and sports and hiking and all that throughout my adolescence. But moving into this new kind of lifestyle, I found myself sitting inside very often, just hanging out with friends, doing that kind of subculture is not very active or productive in society. So stepping back from that and getting away from that illicit use of cannabis, I was really able to focus more on getting into the gym, starting a weightlifting regimen, changing my daily habits so that I wasn't on my phone first thing in the morning, but I was going out and getting in the sunshine and breathing fresh air and just um, working on my circadian rhythm and getting my blood flowing
Mm-hmm.
first thing in the morning. All those things are beneficial in not only just reducing inflammation, but helping you to feel better overall, helping you to become a more resilient person. And weightlifting has been a huge pillar of my healing journey because not only right do I feel better and look better and have more confidence, but my functional medicine doctor has described the muscle mass that I've gained over the years as a sink for eosinophils, or those inflammatory compounds that are wreaking havoc in my brain. So I went from 135 pounds, severely underweight, sedentary, to 180 pounds, and working out 4 days a week. I've gained 50 pounds of muscle mass. And so not only
Mm.
does that muscle mass dilute the effect of these inflammatory compounds on my body, but they actually act as a sink to absorb these compounds and prevent them from entering my basal ganglia, right? They're stored in the muscle tissue. So that's my understanding physiologically of how it works,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quite an amazing explanation of how my body is now treating these inflammatory compounds instead of just letting them run amok in my system.
That's I think that's really great advice, and it tracks so well with what other guests have said on the show. In particular, guests that we're talking about, doing a digital detox when we were
Yeah,
looking at ways to make kids less reliant on devices or on social media, just getting that exercise in. But we also know, what exercise does for your own regulatory capacities, whether you're trying to reduce inflammation, or you're just trying to be able to regulate your emotional responses better, right? So that tracks really well, Ethan. Here's this piece that doesn't track with my past guests, and why I'm interested to learn from you. So we did a series not that long ago on childhood obesity, and one of our guests, possibly one of the best known experts on childhood obesity that exists, spent a lot of time talking about the supplement world. Now she was talking about nutritional supplements, but it was in the same realm, and this is why I want to make sure that you have a chance to distinguish what you're doing from other
sure.
supplements, because a couple of things that she talked about is that the supplement world is unregulated. And because it is, these are her words, not mine, we don't always know what we're getting. We don't know what kind of dose we're receiving. And in her research, there were kids that were taking supplements to get healthier, to build muscle mass, something you've recommended here, that were really harming themselves in the process, right? So, with that as the background for my questions, when you went about making the product that a better version of the product that helped you, how did you avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, so quite honestly, starting from the beginning, it began out of my own need, obviously, for this
Mm,
medicine, right? Coming back to Virginia, this was 2012. CBD was still considered basically hash here in Virginia. It
yeah.
was it was a gray area, really, because it didn't have THC. It wasn't necessarily illegal, but no one was selling it. Nobody really knew about it. And so I took the onus upon myself to start manufacturing these oils in the spare bedroom of my house. So I started experimenting, mixing the plant material and the extracts with different carrier oils. And my friends took interest, and so on and so forth. I started giving it away to friends and family. It started helping other people, and more people started reaching out with interest. I decided, hey, maybe this is something I should brand and market. And we can talk about like my journey towards becoming an entrepreneur and how interesting and serendipitous that was. But regarding the CBD itself, I you're right. Supplement world is very unregulated, and at that time, CBD was completely unregulated. So the three things that I did that were very important to me, I have a background in agriculture, so I wanted the product to be sustainable. I wanted it to be organic. I wanted it to be free of pesticides, free of toxins, anything that would potentially harm me and reverse the effects of the anti-inflammatory medicine I was seeking. So I sought out growers and farmers who did this using ancient cultivation techniques and did things organically, no spray agriculture, and I would purchase the material from them directly. So I'd go out and visit these farms and see exactly where it's coming from. The other piece of the puzzle is the laboratory testing. So third-party laboratory testing, we do full panel lab tests on all of our products. So making sure not only is the dose accurate, but is it free from pesticides? Is it free from agriculture contaminants? Is it free from microbiological contaminants and yeast and mold and fungicides and heavy metals and residual solvents and all this stuff we test for. So again, we're trying to ensure not only is the potency pure and accurate, but is this something that I feel comfortable enough to give my kids, right? And so the fact that all of my products are THC free, we're not focused on getting high. We're focused on providing a trustworthy source of medicine that anybody can take in lieu of some of these pharmaceutical options.
So in thinking about your recommendation for people who are looking for a CBD, I've heard you talk about the fact that having that third party lab to judge its, or to give a verdict, the numbers on its purity, and the fact that there aren't other and its potency. I do want to really quickly ask about the oil, because this is something that has come up in my research and also in my discussions with clinicians. People say CBD oil, and they in fact, I've been, and they make a distinction. I'm not talking, for example, this physician I was talking to said, I'm not talking about gummies. I'm talking about using the oil, and this is how I prescribe the oil to be used. So what's the benefit of the oil as opposed to these other forms? I can get, CBD in my kombucha now.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. It's commonly asked, right? Especially in the world where, you go to the supplement aisle now and everything's in a gummy. It's just, that's the way that's the way the market's trending. People want their supplements sugar coated. The benefit of an oil versus a soft gel or a gummy or any kind of other application is, first of all, the speed of absorption. So an oil, a tincture form, is more fast acting than anything that has to pass through the digestive system, namely because it's sublingually activated. So I recommend customers drop it under their tongue, wait about 30 seconds before swallowing, and the particle size of the CBD is so small that it will enter your bloodstream directly under your tongue. So it skips the digestive system, it gets to work faster, and is usually longer lasting as well.
The other piece, and I do need your help with this, is as I was looking through your products, and again as I was reading about different clinical trials of CBD, the notion of the correct dose, because people are having to seek out these treatments maybe without the supervision of a doctor. And by the way, I would say, first of all, look to see if you have a physician that understands, or a psychiatrist that understands CBD and can work with you to get the right dose. That would be my recommendation. Yes. But if you don't have access to somebody, and you are in a position similar to what Ethan described as being frustrated with being misdiagnosed and over-medicated, how do you go about deciding what dose of CBD is right for you? That to me seems terrifying as well.
That is the number one question we get, is how much should I take, right? And I absolutely agree with you. Ask your physician. More and more doctors are recommending our products for their patients, which is very encouraging, that people are kind of opening up to these alternative treatments. It's great to hear that. knowing what I know now. In terms of dosing, the safest bet is to start with a very small amount and work up as needed. Unfortunately, through years and years of research and thousands of people who have tried our product, we have determined that there is no baseline dose. Like you can't tell me how many kilograms you weigh, and I can tell you how many milligrams to take. It just doesn't really work that way. So there's just so many variables that affect how much you should take, and so that's our recommendation: is start with a small amount, work up as needed until you find the dose that works best for you, and you'll know if it's not doing anything. Chances are you're just not getting that threshold dose to make a difference in your health, and you need to work up. Conversely, the only real commonly reported side effect of CBD is drowsiness. So if you're looking for sleep support, that's ideal, right? But if you're tired, or if you find yourself feeling sleepy or lethargic during the day, that could be a sign where you've taken too much. So you can cut back that dose and again just dial in what works best for you.
And I know, Ethan, that I believe that this helping clinicians understand the benefits of these new and emerging treatments is something that you're concerned with as well. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I work very closely with the Neuroimmune Foundation, and one of the biggest things that we work on with that foundation is fundraising for and providing CME credits, which are continuing physician education credits. So if you are a physician listening to this, or if you would like to help inform your physician about PANDAS, how to diagnose and how to treat it, please reach out to me or the Neuroimmune Foundation. We have these CME credits available to physicians where they can continue their education. They get credit for it, and they also become equipped with the tools they need to effectively diagnose and treat diseases like PANDAS. So, if my physician had access to this 20 years ago, my road would have been a lot smoother. So this is something good that we're providing for the community.
That's fantastic. I'd like to point out that there are, and I'm going to put links to this in the show notes, but there have been some really wonderful research papers written about CBD's effect on anxiety. There's less written about its effect on PANDAS, and I think that's because going back to how we started this episode, I think PANDAS is misunderstood. But I will put up the NIH's briefing on PANDAS that you can see for yourself, that the medical community is kind of acknowledged that it's not well understood, and it's underdiagnosed, and it's poorly treated. But in the clinical, like the data on clinical trials around CBD, what exists now, there are two findings that we know from some very good meta-analyses of other studies. And again, longtime listeners of Talking About Kids know that I love meta-analyses, and that I devoted a whole episode talking with Eric Hedberg about how we know if something works. And meta-analyses were key to that. But what we know is that CBD in clinical trials has been shown to reduce anxiety. So this is a really good note. And then all these studies also note that we haven't been studying this long enough to know about side effects. Did you have anything you wanted to add about that? I warned you that I was going to bring up the fact that we don't have enough data to know as much as we'd like to about side effects.
Absolutely. And the only thing we can really do with that is just push forward and try to learn more. Currently, and I mentioned this to you, we are working with the University of Virginia Medical Center on a clinical trial for oral CBD for pain management. I'm working with an osteopathic surgeon who specifically wants to know, can I give this to my patients for post-surgical recovery in order to help them heal faster, reduce the inflammation, and feel less pain without resorting to opioids or other pain medications. So I am all about learning more and running these clinical trials and finding what works. I also believe that the anecdotal evidence does matter. You have thousands of testimonials that are saying, this this helped my child, this helped me feel better, this and that and the other. That counts for something. Sure, it's not quantitative data, but like if it helps me, there's a chance it could help you. And so I think we definitely need to push forward and learn more and learn about the potential side effects and long-term risks. But CBD has been around for a long time. I mean, it was first isolated in the 60s by Israeli scientists. And as far as we know, there is no toxic level that you could take. You could drink the entire bottle and it's not gonna hurt you. But with dosing, the idea is to find the minimum amount of CBD to achieve your maximum benefits.
Well, Ethan, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and for what you've done in order to bring something that worked for you personally to market to help other people. I appreciate that. And yeah, this is. I hear from so many parents of so many kids with neurodivergence, being at PANDAS or being it other things, that they're so frustrated with the treatments that are available to them now that I almost think it's irresponsible not to continue to mine the research and mine the possibilities. There's this other thing we talk about here, and then I'm going to close it, which is, too often the treatment providers that are available to us get stuck in what they were educated in when they went to school. And being a physician, being a psychiatrist, being a mental health provider doesn't mean that you are afforded the opportunities to stay up on the mountains of new research that's being released constantly. So one of the things that you can do, and I know that my clinical listeners and my clinical friends are going to get mad at me when I say this, bring these studies to your physicians, bring it to your mental health and healthcare providers and show them, put these studies in front of them and see what they have to say. And maybe you'll be able to help other kids as well. But again, thank you, Ethan, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you, Brad. It was a pleasure.
That was Ethan Pompeo. More information about Ethan and links to Green Valley Nutrition and other resources that we cite is at talkingaboutkids.com. And when you do visit talkingaboutkids.com, send me a note. Let me know what you think. I read every bit of feedback. Talking About Kids theme song is by the Senators. For more of their music, go to thesenatorsmusic.com. And remember, kids are young goats and young humans, and the difference is that young goats are easier to manage.